The Kaelith royal palace looked like someone had convinced crystals to grow in a politically significant arrangement. Adrian Tors checked his datapad for the third time, confirmed he was supposed to be here, and tried not to feel like a maintenance worker who'd accidentally wandered into a museum gala. Which technically was exactly what he was. Adrian Tors, a Kaelith official, approached, her long ears sweeping back in elegant curves that made human anatomy look unfinished. "You're the atmospheric filtration specialist." "That's me. Here to discuss environmental system upgrades." Adrian gestured at his practical work clothes, which stood out dramatically among the flowing robes and formal attire surrounding him. "I was told this was a technical consultation, not a formal reception." "It's both. The Queen prefers efficiency." The official's ears rotated slightly. Interest, Adrian had learned, or possibly judgment. "Follow me. Ministers will want to discuss implementation costs and timeline." The reception hall was architectural poetry that Adrian's engineer brain immediately wanted to analyze. Load-bearing structures disguised as art, ventilation cleverly integrated into decorative elements, and lighting that came from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. He was mentally calculating airflow patterns when he noticed the room's social dynamics. Kaelith courtiers moved in careful patterns, their positions and groupings clearly significant in ways Adrian's cultural briefing hadn't adequately explained. The Queen, Meridian, according to his notes, stood at the far end speaking with advisors, her presence commanding without obvious effort. Her ears bore silver threading that marked royal status, and her expression suggested someone perpetually 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Adrian found himself near a group of ministers discussing filtration specifications, with the enthusiasm of people who'd rather be discussing literally anything else. He was explaining molecular separation rates when the room changed. Conversation stopped mid-word. Courtiers froze in positions that suggested they'd been turned to statues. Even the ambient music, some kind of crystalline chiming, seemed to fade into background static. Adrian looked up from his datapad, following everyone's gaze to. Behind him, before he could turn, small arms wrapped around his waist from behind. A child's voice spoke rapidly in Kaelith, words his translator implant caught but didn't fully process through the surprised confusion. Adrian looked down. A small figure clung to him, maybe 7 years old by human standards, wearing formal robes that seemed too elaborate for her age, her long ears shorter and more delicate than the adults. Her eyes were closed, her ears pressed flat against her head, and she held on to Adrian like he was the only stable thing in a tilting world. Adrian said intelligently, his hands raised in the universal gesture of, "I don't know what's happening and I'm afraid to make it worse." The Queen was moving toward him now, her expression unreadable but her speed suggesting this was not part of planned palace protocols. Guardians appeared from nowhere, their weapons still sheathed but their postures screaming readiness. "Princess Lissa," Queen Meridian said, her voice carrying authority and something that might have been concern. "What are you doing?" The child, Princess Lissa, apparently didn't let go. She said something in Kaelith that made several courtiers gasp audibly. "She says," the Queen's translator spoke carefully, "that this is the human who helped her, who made the scary place not scary." Adrian's brain performed several computational errors trying to process this. "I'm sorry, but I've never met." He stopped, looked down at the princess, saw something in her face that triggered a memory from 2 years ago. "Wait. The trade summit, Station Kepler, the structural failure." Lissa nodded vigorously, still not letting go. "There was a scared kid in a service corridor during the evacuation," Adrian said slowly, memory piecing together. "I stayed with her until security found us. I didn't know she was, I thought she was just some diplomat's kid." "She is the crown princess," the Queen said quietly, and Adrian felt his stomach drop. "And she has been asking about the kind human at every diplomatic function since that day. Describing you in detail we thought were a child's exaggeration." The room remained silent. Adrian noticed courtiers exchanging looks that suggested this was politically significant in ways he absolutely didn't understand. "Your Majesty, I apologize if I've caused a disruption," Adrian tried, keeping his voice calm despite growing panic. "I was just here to discuss filtration systems." "You were," Queen Meridian agreed. She'd reached them now, standing close enough that Adrian could see the complex emotions cycling through her expression. "But my daughter has decided you are worthy of her trust, publicly, in front of the entire court. Is that bad? That depends entirely on what kind of person you actually are." The Queen studied him with intensity that made Adrian want to check if his credentials were in order. In Kaelith culture, a child's instinctive trust is considered one of the truest measures of character, especially a royal child who is taught from birth to be cautious around strangers. "I just kept her calm during an evacuation," Adrian protested. "Showed her how air recyclers worked. Let her help me check pressure gauges." It was basic crisis de-escalation. To you, perhaps. To her, it was the moment that defined what safety feels like. Queen Meridian made a gesture, and the Guardian stepped back slightly. "She has told me many times about the human who didn't run, who stayed and made her understand that loud noises couldn't hurt her, who trusted her to be helpful instead of treating her as a problem to be solved." Lissa pulled back slightly, looking up at Adrian with eyes that held recognition and something approaching joy. "You stayed," she said in heavily accented standard. "Everyone was running, you stayed." "Well, yeah," Adrian said, finding himself automatically responding to the child despite the dozens of politically significant adults watching. "Someone had to make sure you were okay. And the pressure fluctuation was minor, nothing actually dangerous once you understood what was happening. See." Lissa looked at her mother triumphantly. "He makes scary things not scary." Several courtiers made sounds that Adrian's translator rendered as politically significant acknowledgement. The Queen's expression shifted into something that might have been approval or might have been calculation. "Adrian Tors," she said formally, "would you be willing to accompany Princess Lissa to her studies? She has been insistent that she wishes to show you her work, and I find myself curious to observe how you interact with her in less formal circumstances." Adrian looked at the princess, at the Queen, at the room full of courtiers who were clearly processing this as some kind of major event. His filtration consultation had somehow transformed into a character assessment with galactic political implications. "Sure," he said, because what else could he say when a 7-year-old princess was looking at him with hope and a queen was watching him with sharp evaluation. "I'd be happy to see your studies." Lissa beamed, took his hand with absolute trust, and led him toward a side exit. Behind them, Adrian heard the room erupt into whispered conversation that suggested his life had just become significantly more complicated. He'd come to discuss air filters. Somehow, he was leaving holding hands with royalty, while an entire court tried to figure out what it meant that their princess had publicly chosen to trust a human stranger. Adrian suspected his filtration consultation was about to become the least important part of his day. Lissa's study room made Adrian's childhood classroom look like a supply closet. Interactive displays covered 3 walls, showing everything from stellar cartography to what appeared to be advanced mathematics that made his engineering degree feel inadequate. The princess settled at a small desk and immediately began pulling up holographic projections. "This is my astronomy work," she announced proudly. "Mother says I'm very good at star patterns." Adrian examined the display, complex orbital mechanics that most human 7-year-olds would find incomprehensible. "That's impressive. You understand gravitational influences." "Of course. Stars pull on each other. Like how people pull on each other with trust and loyalty." Lissa tilted her head, ears rotating forward. "You understand pulling forces. You fix air systems." "I do. Pressure differentials, flow dynamics." "Different than gravity but similar principles." Adrian sat cross-legged on the floor, bringing himself to her eye level. "You remember that from the station, the air recyclers. You showed me the spinning parts. Said they pulled bad air in and pushed good air out." Lissa's expression grew more serious. "Everyone else was yelling and running. You were calm. Why?" "Because panicking doesn't fix problems. Understanding them does." Adrian pulled up his own datapad, showing her a simplified atmospheric schematic. The station's pressure fluctuation was scary sounding, but not actually dangerous. Like thunder, loud but harmless if you understand what causes it. "Thunder is electricity in clouds," Lissa said immediately. "We learned that last week." "Exactly, and the station's problem was just compressed air escaping too quickly. Sounded terrible, wasn't actually a crisis." Adrian highlighted parts of the schematic. "If I'd panicked and run, I wouldn't have been able to help anyone, including scared kids in service corridors." Lissa studied him with an intensity that seemed too old for her apparent age. "Mother says you didn't know I was important, that you helped me because you're kind, not because you wanted to gain favor with the royal family. I helped you because you were a terrified kid, and I was an adult in a position to help. That's just basic human decency. Not basic for everyone." Lissa's ears drooped slightly. "Many courtiers help me because I'm the princess. They smile and say nice things, but their eyes are looking past me to mother." Calculating advantage. The observation was disturbingly perceptive. Adrian glanced toward the doorway where he'd noticed a guard stationed, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to grant the illusion of privacy. "That sounds lonely." "It is." Lissa returned her attention to the astronomy display, her small hands manipulating constellations with practiced ease. "That's why I remember you. You weren't looking past me. You were just there, present, making the scary less scary." Before Adrian could respond, Queen Meridian entered, her movement so graceful it seemed rehearsed. She observed them for a moment, Adrian sitting on the floor, Lissa showing him her stellar mechanics work, and something in her expression softened. "Princess, would you give us a moment?" the Queen asked gently. Adult conversation. Lissa looked between them, her ears rotating in what Adrian was learning to recognize as assessment. "You're going to ask him questions to see if he's really nice or just pretending." "Something like that," Meridian admitted with a small smile. "He's really nice. I already checked." But Lissa stood, moving toward a reading alcove with a book whose script Adrian couldn't identify. "I'll be over here, not listening very hard." The Queen settled into a chair that seemed to materialize from the room's architecture. "Adrian Tors, civilian contractor, excellent safety record, slightly concerning tendency to stay in dangerous situations when evacuation is ordered. Someone has to turn off the systems properly," Adrian said. "Saves damage and makes restarts faster. Basic professional responsibility, or foolish disregard for personal safety." But the Queen's tone suggested she was testing rather than judging. "Tell me about the incident with Lissa. What were you thinking?" Adrian considered lying, then decided against it. "Honestly, I was annoyed. The pressure fluctuation was a minor issue that someone had escalated into a full evacuation. People were panicking over what amounted to a loud mechanical burp. I was trying to calm the situation down when I found your daughter, though I didn't know she was your daughter, crying in a service corridor." "And you stayed with her?" "Of course I stayed. She was maybe 5 years old, terrified, and everyone else was too busy panicking to notice her." Adrian met the Queen's eyes. "I showed her how the air recyclers worked, let her help me check pressure gauges. Made it into a game instead of a crisis. Basic crisis de-escalation." "Basic," Meridian repeated softly. "Yet many trained professionals failed to do the same. They focused on the perceived threat rather than the frightened child. With respect, Your Majesty, they weren't thinking clearly. Fear makes people stupid. I wasn't afraid because I understood the situation, so I could focus on what actually mattered, keeping a kid calm until proper help arrived." The Queen was quiet for a moment, her long ears tilting in what might have been approval. "You didn't seek recognition afterward. Didn't report that you'd assisted a member of the royal family. I didn't know she was royal family. And even if I had, that's not why you help people. You help because they need help, not because of who they are or what benefit you might gain." Adrian paused. "Is this going to be a problem? Because I really just came here to discuss filtration systems." "It's going to be complicated," Meridian corrected. "In Kaelith culture, bonds of loyalty and trust are sacred, more significant than bloodlines or titles. Our queens are chosen not by birth, but by who inspires the most genuine devotion, particularly from children, who haven't learned to lie about what they see in people's character." Adrian felt understanding dawn with growing dread. "And your daughter just publicly demonstrated trust in me, in front of the entire court." "Yes." The queen's expression held something between amusement and calculation. "You've accidentally become politically relevant, Adrian Tors. Some will view this as an opportunity to strengthen human-Kaelith relations. Others will see you as a threat to their carefully maintained positions of influence." "I'm an atmospheric filtration specialist," Adrian protested. "I fix air systems. I'm not qualified for political relevance." "You kept a frightened child calm during a crisis without knowing she was royalty. You stayed when others ran. You treated her as a person rather than a problem." Meridian leaned forward. "That qualifies you for far more than you realize. The question is what you'll do with that qualification." From the reading alcove, Lissa's voice piped up. "I thought I wasn't listening very hard." "You never were good at not listening," Meridian said affectionately. She stood, her formal demeanor returning. "Adrian Tors, I'm extending an invitation for you to remain at the palace for the next few days. Officially, to complete your consultation on environmental systems. Unofficially, to allow me to observe whether my daughter's instinct about your character is accurate. And if I decline, then you decline, and I respect that choice." But Lissa would be disappointed. The queen's ears tilted back slightly. "And I would wonder what you're afraid of." "I'm afraid of accidentally causing diplomatic incidents because I don't understand alien court politics," Adrian admitted. "That's honest, at least." Meridian moved toward the doorway. "The invitation stands. Think about it. Discuss it with my daughter if you wish. She has surprisingly strong opinions about people's character." The queen departed with the same grace she'd entered with, leaving Adrian sitting on the floor of a royal study room while a 7-year-old princess pretended to read, but was obviously listening to every word. "You're going to stay, right?" Lissa asked without looking up from her book. "You make things less scary. The court needs that." "I make filtration systems work properly," Adrian corrected. "That's not the same as making courts less scary. It's exactly the same. You see problems clearly instead of panicking. That's what makes scary things not scary." Lissa finally looked at him, her expression impossibly wise for her apparent age. "Please stay. Mother needs someone who doesn't want anything from her, and I need someone who remembers I'm a person, not just a princess." Adrian looked at this small alien child who'd somehow decided he was trustworthy based on 10 minutes of interaction 2 years ago, who'd waited at diplomatic functions hoping to find him again, who was now asking him to stay not because of protocol but because she was lonely. "Okay," he heard himself say. "I'll stay a few days, while I finish the filtration consultation." Lissa's smile could have powered the entire palace. "Good. Tomorrow I'll show you my engineering studies. I've been designing better airflow patterns for the eastern wing. I think you'll find my calculations interesting." "I'm sure I will," Adrian said, and realized with creeping certainty that he just agreed to something far more significant than consulting on air filters. He'd agreed to be trusted by royalty, in a culture where trust mattered more than bloodlines. His life had just gotten exponentially more complicated, and somehow it was all because he'd stayed calm during an evacuation 2 years ago. The following morning, Adrian found himself attending what was euphemistically called a casual court gathering, which turned out to be 30 elaborately dressed Kaelith officials trying to look casual while obviously sizing him up. He stood near a refreshment table, holding something that looked like juice but tasted like flowers, had opinions about flavor, when a senior courtier approached. Adrian Tors, the human who has captured Princess Lissa's attention. The courtier's ears tilted in what Adrian's cultural notes suggested was calculation. I am Lord Varath, Chief Advisor to the Treasury. I wonder if we might discuss potential infrastructure investments that could benefit both our peoples. I'm not really involved in policy decisions, Adrian said carefully. I just fix environmental systems. But you have the princess's ear, and through her, potentially the queen's consideration. Varath's smile didn't reach his eyes. A word from you about the importance of technological cooperation could prove beneficial for everyone involved. Adrian took a sip of the flower opinion juice to buy time. Lord Varath, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm here because a 7-year-old remembered I was kind to her 2 years ago. I have no political influence, no special access to the Queen, and absolutely no interest in being used as someone's backdoor to power. Varath's ears pressed flat displeasure. Adrian guessed. The princess's trust is not a small matter. You would be wise to recognize its value. I recognize that a kid decided I was safe. That's it. If you want to discuss infrastructure investments, take it up with the actual experts. I'm just the guy who makes sure your air doesn't smell bad. Adrian set down his drink. Now, if you'll excuse me, Princess Lissa is teaching me about Kaelith stellar navigation. He escaped before Varath could press further, finding Lissa waiting by one of the large crystalline windows overlooking the palace gardens. She looked up as he approached, her expression shrewd. Lord Varath wanted you to influence Mother. How did you know? Because that's what Lord Varath does. He collects favors and connections like Mother collects trust. Lissa returned her attention to the gardens. He's been trying to get closer to our family for years. Now he thinks you're his opportunity. I'm not anyone's opportunity. I'm an engineer who accidentally became relevant. Adrian joined her at the window. Your culture is exhausting, by the way. Everyone's calculating advantage instead of just having conversations. That's why you're different. You just have conversations. Lissa pointed at something in the gardens, a structure that looked like a gazebo made from living crystal. Mother is down there. She wanted me to invite you for a walk, said it would be less formal than court gatherings. Your mother could have invited me directly. She wanted to see if I trusted you enough to bring you to her informal spaces. Lissa looked up at him. I do, obviously. You're safe. Adrian followed the princess through corridors that were somehow less grand, but more beautiful than the formal spaces. Private areas where functionality merged with aesthetics in ways that made his engineer brain happy. They emerged into gardens that looked designed by someone who understood how plants and light and water could create peace. Queen Meridian stood beside the crystal gazebo, her formal robes replaced with simpler clothing that somehow made her seem more regal rather than less. She smiled as they approached, a genuine expression that transformed her face from distant authority to someone who might actually enjoy smiling. Adrian, thank you for joining us. I thought we might talk away from the court's endless observation. She gestured at a bench. Lissa, would you give us a moment? I believe the Eastern Gardens have new flowers you wanted to catalog. I'm being sent away so you can have another adult conversation, Lissa said matter-of-factly. That's fine. I need to update my botanical records anyway. She squeezed Adrian's hand once, then departed with the unself-conscious grace of children who knew they were loved. Meridian settled onto the bench and Adrian joined her, maintaining respectful distance. The Queen studied the gardens for a moment before speaking. You handled Lord Varath well, honest refusal rather than political maneuvering. I'm not good at political maneuvering. I tend to just say what I'm thinking. Adrian watched crystal leaves catch the light. He's not the first person who's tried to use me as a connection to you. I'm guessing he won't be the last. No, he won't. Meridian's expression grew more serious. The truth, Adrian, is that my court is filled with people who secured their positions through family connections, political marriages, and calculated alliances. They're competent at administration but lacking in genuine loyalty. They serve because it benefits them, not because they believe in what we're building. And you want people who believe. I want people my daughter trusts, because she has an instinct for genuine character that courtiers have trained themselves to ignore. The Queen met his eyes. You know what she told me yesterday? She said you're the first adult outside our family who treats her like a person who happens to be a princess, rather than a princess who happens to be a person. Adrian considered this. She is a person who happens to be a princess. The princess part is just her job. The person part is who she is. Exactly. Meridian smiled. Do you understand why that matters? In a culture where bonds and loyalty are considered more important than bloodlines, I'm starting to. Adrian looked back toward where Lissa had disappeared into the gardens. She's lonely. Surrounded by people who see her title instead of her, who calculate advantage instead of just being present. Yes, and then you stayed with her during a crisis. Made her feel safe not because of who she was, but because you're someone who stays when others run. The Queen's voice held something Adrian couldn't quite identify. You gave her a memory of what genuine care looks like. She's been searching for that ever since. I just kept a scared kid calm during an evacuation. You just saved her from feeling alone in a crisis. That's not a small thing. Meridian stood, moving to the crystal structure and touching it gently. Adrian, I'm going to offer you something unusual. A position as cultural liaison, ostensibly to help improve human Kaelith understanding. In reality, because my daughter has decided you're trustworthy, and I trust her judgment more than any background check or political recommendation. Your Majesty, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not qualified for. You're qualified by being the kind of person who stays calm in emergencies and treats frightened children with patience. That's more qualification than half my court possesses. She turned to face him. I'm not asking you to become a politician. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are, someone who sees problems clearly, responds with practical kindness, and doesn't calculate personal advantage before helping people. Adrian felt the weight of the offer settling on him like atmospheric pressure. What if I'm not actually that person? What if Lissa's memory is better than my reality? Then we'll discover that, and I'll thank you for your honesty and send you back to fixing air filters. Meridian's expression held challenge and something like hope. But I don't think that's who you are. I think you're someone who genuinely doesn't understand how rare it is to stay when everyone else runs. To help without expectation of reward, to treat a princess like a person. Because it seems obvious, Adrian protested. She was scared, I could help. Basic humanity. Basic to you. Revolutionary to a court that has forgotten what genuine care looks like without political calculation attached. The Queen moved closer. Stay. Help me build something better than what exists. Not with grand gestures or political maneuvering, but by being someone my daughter, and my realm, can trust to care about people rather than positions. Adrian thought about Lissa's lonely precision in navigating court politics, about Lord Vareth calculating advantage, about a culture that valued loyalty but seemed to have forgotten how to recognize it without seeing a transaction attached. Okay, he said finally, I'll stay. Try this cultural liaison thing, but I reserve the right to be completely honest, occasionally inappropriate and probably terrible at formal protocol. Those are features, not bugs, Meridian said, and her smile suggested she'd just won something important. Welcome to the palace, Adrian Tors. Try not to cause too many diplomatic incidents. No promises, Adrian replied, and the Queen laughed, a genuine sound that suggested beneath the crown and the careful political maneuvering was someone who remembered what it felt like to just be human. Or in her case, Kaelith. But the principle held. 3 months later, Adrian had learned several important things. Kaelith court politics were exhausting, Princess Lissa was frighteningly intelligent, and teaching a 7-year-old about atmospheric engineering created surprisingly useful insights into palace environmental systems. The Eastern Wing has terrible airflow, Lissa announced during one of their regular study sessions, pointing at schematics she'd somehow acquired. The original architects prioritized aesthetics over function. We're wasting 30% efficiency. You're not wrong, Adrian admitted, studying her calculations. But redesigning active systems in an occupied palace is complicated. So we do it in stages. Phase 1 focuses on the least disruptive changes. Lissa had already highlighted her proposed modifications. I've calculated implementation costs and timeline. It's very reasonable. You're 7 years old. You shouldn't be this good at project management. I'm a princess. We're trained early. But she smiled, pleased by the implied compliment. Besides, you make it interesting. Engineering is just problem solving with better math. Adrian had discovered that teaching Lissa gave him an excuse to interact with palace systems, which led to conversations with maintenance staff, which revealed inefficiencies that he could actually help fix. His cultural liaison position had quietly evolved into something between advisor, engineer, and professional person, who asked obvious questions everyone else ignored. Queen Meridian appeared in the doorway. Watching them work with an expression Adrian had learned to recognize as the queen calculating whether something is politically useful while simultaneously just being a proud mother. Princess, you have etiquette lessons in 10 minutes. Lissa's ears drooped dramatically. But we're redesigning the Eastern Wing's entire environmental system, which will still be there after you learn proper diplomatic greeting protocols for visiting dignitaries. Meridian's tone allowed no argument, but her eyes held amusement. Adrian will be here tomorrow. Fine. Lissa stood with theatrical reluctance, but etiquette is much less interesting than airflow dynamics. Most things are, Adrian agreed. But sometimes we do boring stuff because it's part of the job. After Lissa departed, Meridian settled into the chair her daughter had vacated. She's flourishing. More confident, more engaged with her studies. The court has noticed. She's smart. She just needed someone to take her interests seriously instead of dismissing them as childish distractions. Adrian began organizing their work materials. Though I should probably apologize for encouraging her engineering obsession, I'm guessing that's not typical royal behavior. It's exactly the behavior I want from her. Curiosity about how things work, practical problem solving, understanding that titles are just jobs and jobs require actual skills. Meridian picked up one of Lissa's calculation sheets. You've given her something more valuable then.